Hello, hello. Welcome all back to week 10 of Computers in the Studio. As always, my name is Kevin. Um, Please be sure that before you start this lesson that you've watched week 9 of Computers in the Studio, in which where we introduced After Effects, went over the workspace, how to use the timeline, importing from Photoshop and Illustrator. And so now with this week, we will be going over specifically layers and also masks and just the layers panel as a whole. So we're going to create a new project, and from this, click Create a New Composition. From here, you can just call this Layers Exercise. Make sure that it is set to HD TV 1080 with about 30 frames per second. That's pretty standard. And then you can have it at 1090 pixels wide and 1080 height. Make sure it's set to square pixels, and it can be about 10 seconds with the background color of black. Hit OK. And so from that, now you'll see your workspace. You want to make sure that it's set to standard and that you reset it to the saved layout so that it looks like mine. You should have a composition now in your project finder. Now, as stated, we're going to talk about the layers panel. And so previously, we were importing things from Photoshop, from Illustrator, and working with them as material. But After Effects can make its own shapes. It can make its own things within the actual program itself that you can then edit from scratch. And so the way you get to this, or the way I'm going to show you to get to this, is you can right-click, hit New, and you'll see that there are all of these elements now available for you to make. So we're going to start with text. And so what you should see is, you'll see something called an empty text layer, you'll see a red line, and then over on this side you'll see that now there is a panel that is very similar to a lot of panels on Adobe creative programs that kind of allows you to edit and manipulate the text in very much a standard way as all the programs do. So I'm just going to type out hello. And so for me, this has already been, I've been messing with this so it's preset to red, but if this is your first time doing this, chances are the color will be black and you might not see it, so be sure to select it and change the color to another color that you can see. As stated, you can do all the things that you would normally be able to do in an Adobe program. So I can change the font, I can change the text size, I can change pixel width of the stroke, I can change how tall this is, or then how wide this is. I can change if it's all caps, italics, if it is small caps, if certain parts of it are superscripts or subscripts. Okay, and then once you finish, hit Command Enter, and this will allow you to now move this properly without accidentally clicking back into it to edit the text. Before moving on, there's another point I want to get at, and I kind of needed the material to do it, so we're going to use this text, and that is talking about the anchor point. So with the anchor point, you'll see that there is kind of this tiny circle right here, or there's a tiny circle somewhere on your screen, kind of looks like a crosshair. So this anchor point kind of does what it says. It provides a point of pivot for your element. And so this becomes important when you're using keyframes to maybe rotate or move things, and you want them to move from a very specific place. So for example, if I was animating a character and I was moving their arm, I would want their pivot points to be the shoulder and the elbow and the wrist. And so it's very useful to know exactly how to edit and change this. And so you can edit an anchor point by coming over here to the Pan Behind Anchor Point tool or hitting Y. And from this, I can then now select the anchor point and move it. And I can move it, say, maybe to the center or anywhere else. And now this becomes the pivot point. So if I go back up here and click on my rotation tool, you'll see that now it's rotating. My text should be rotating around this specific anchor point. If now I then want to recenter my anchor point within the element itself, what I would do is click on V, click on my element, and then holding Command, double click on my pan behind anchor tool. And what you'll see now is that it has properly been centered within this element. So this detour is simply to explain anchor points because they are extremely important and will become useful with your moving portraits project and other projects that will be assigned in this class. So now going back to text, let's go over the properties that you can animate for text. So if I go down into my layers panel, I can click on this drop down, and then from that you'll then see that there are two different properties I can change. One called transform, and these hold kind of the standard animatable properties that you'll be able to animate with any element of in the layers panel. So shapes, solids, everything should generally have these elements to animate, or these properties to animate. The next one is specific to text itself. And so if I click on this, you'll then now see that there's a further drop down. And then with that, there's something called source text. And so this is if I want to change anything specifically about the integrity of this text. So if I click on the keyframe, and then I go out to about maybe 2 seconds, what you'll see is I'm now going to change the color. I'm going to change it to white. And so what you'll see now is that a keyframe has been made at 2 seconds. And so at about 2 seconds, I'm going to play this. And at about 2 seconds, you'll see that it now shifts over to the new color that I had chosen, which in this case is white. Within path options, so if those of you know Illustrator, how you can type on a path, this is a similar thing. And so I want to make sure that I have my text layer selected. So make sure it's selected. And then now I'm going to click on the pen tool with G. And I'm going to just draw a quick simple path, just kind of across this way. And now if I go back to my path options, in the drop down you'll see now there's something called mask 1. And so what we've done is we've created a mask within the layer, and it's being picked up by path options. And then now if I click on that, you'll see that the text has moved to follow this path. This path then now can be changed, so if I then click on this end, I can move it up, down, kind of edit it in similar ways I would be able to edit this in Illustrator. Now, if I wanted to then change things over time, similarly, you'll see that there are all of these properties belowhand. So with reverse path, for example, I can then click on a keyframe, click on the stopwatch to create a keyframe. In about 2 seconds, I can then change what side the type is being written on. And so we're going to play that, and you'll see 2 seconds, bam, it switches. The other aspect of it, and some of you might have noticed this, is that now under text, or under the type layer, you'll see that there's text, but now there's this masks option. And so if I click on that masks option, you'll see that there's now mask 1, which is color-coded with pink or whatever color is here to denote this path that my type is being written on. And if I click into that, you'll see that now I'm able to edit things about this mask over time as well. The kind of most interesting example of this is changing the actual shape of the mask path. So I'm going to click on my stopwatch to start a keyframe, and I'm going to move over to about 2 seconds. And in order to make sure this works, you want to have the type layer selected. You don't want to have this specific mask selected. You want to make sure that you're selecting the whole mask layer. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on the line, one of the ends of the lines, and I'm going to move it. Move it maybe up, whichever direction you want to move it in. And I'm also going to kind of edit the anchor points so that it kind of curves a little bit. And so what you'll see now is if I move back to 0, you'll see that over time the path is now changing, which is really, really cool. So this is about as far as I'm going to go with changing and editing type and text for the time being. Please refer to exercise 1 to see what I'm asking of you to create, to get some experience with doing this. And I will see you in the next video where we talk about solids as well as masks. Thank you all. This has been Computers in the Studio, Week 10.